how way, ay, 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 ay. How we up, ay, 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 ay. How way, ay, 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 how way, ay, 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 ay.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Bridge. I'm your host, Kira Young, and you've reached me on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And we are triple casting again tonight with People's Internet Radio and Real Liberty Media. So however you're listening, thanks for listening, and welcome everyone. You're listening to listener-supported radio. Why is it important to listen to listener-supported radio? Because you're going to get what you want to listen to and not what corporate media wants you to listen to. So please support whatever station you're listening from. And once a year, I ask you also to support The Bridge with Kira, if you can. Our production costs are not high, but we do have some projects that we work on all year long. We have an animal rescue, basically animal rescue operation going on out of our house. And right now there's 5 cats inside, 5 feral cats, and 2 big dogs that we're feeding. So if you want to help us with that, you can. If you've learned something on this show and you want to throw us a few, that would really help us a lot. And our bigger project that we have going on is our food sovereignty project, which we are, our lifetime goal is our own food sovereignty. And in the process, we are fighting hunger and food insecurity in our own area and helping out folks who normally don't really get a chance to consume organic vegetables. And they get a chance also to learn how to grow them themselves, should they choose to do that. So those are some projects that if you learn something from this show and you want to support us, just drop me a few in my PayPal, which is valkyra1969 at gmail.com. That's VALKYRA 1969 at gmail.com. And please don't forget to support the radio stations because they do have production costs and we're getting you free content every single day. It's not about really, none of us are making a living at this. We're really trying to get information out that's important. And for this show in particular, we're trying to get you information about the resistance. That's what we're documenting. These shows are the historical record of how we are resisting the fascist government that we're living under. And what is fascism? When government and corporations become one. And that is indeed what we are dealing with. And their link gets stronger and stronger by the day. And their ability to charge us money for simply living gets, the price we pay gets higher and higher every day. So that's what's going on. So we're just trying to get this information out to you. And, if you want to support us, that really helps us. But that's not what it's about. So that's why I only mention it about once a year, because I hate asking people for money and I hate all this stuff about, blah, 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 blah. Whatever. We're getting you good information. In the second hour, we're going to give you an update live from White Pine Camp. And as you know, we mentioned last week that these are some hardcore activists that are living in trees, and they are trying to stop the Mariner East pipeline. So we're welcoming Josh Michener back, chef extraordinaire, and we are also going to be talking to Elise Gerhart, who is the daughter of Ellen Gerhart, who is the property owner where that camp is at. But in the first hour, we're going to be talking to Alisha Ali Vincent is coming back because we didn't even get even partially through that list. So Steve, if you could get Alisha on, that would be great. The first thing I want to talk to her about is that explosive intercept article that came out today that basically confirms everything that I've been saying for months on here. Hey, Alisha, welcome back to the bridge.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I was just beginning to dive into the explosive intercept article that came out today that totally proves what we've been saying all along, that the government basically used emergency management law to unleash military anti-insurgent tactics onto the people at Standing Rock. And pretty hardcore stuff. And we've got the proof now. It's not just speculation.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that amazing? We're not conspiracy theorists. We're not crazy. It actually really was happening. There were people who were followed. There absolutely were things taking place that were coordinated efforts to not just identify who might be considered official, quote, leadership, or who might be considered heads of the movement, and then try to figure out what those people's activities were. Basically to try to undermine everything we were doing because they're comparing us to jihadists.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, and they are right in that it was and is an insurgency. But since when is that illegal? Since we're supposed to have this Constitution thing going on.
Well, on the 4th of July, we're going to celebrate a really big insurgency. So I'm a little confused what the function of all of these government dollars and all of these programs are for. But that's what I'll be. Are you going to celebrate the insurgency on the 4th of July? I'm going to.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's a good excuse. I know I'm going to eat the barbecue. That is for sure. Because we are just a little south of Mason-Dixon line, and we take advantage of that whenever possible in terms of eating.
I don't know. I mean, I think at this point I've looked at all these documents, talked to enough people that at this point there is really nothing left for me to do other than two things. Number one, start looking at it with humor, because what else is there? And then the second thing is, I think it's lawsuit time. I fully 100% believe that it's lawsuit time. And
so that's what Cody Hall's live video is about, is we need a class action lawsuit. We need to all get together because what they did was illegal. They painted the water protectors as this violent uprising because they're afraid of Native religion. They don't know the difference between, a ceremony to welcome a baby into the world and a war dance. So they're going to, strike with an iron fist on all of it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what those words were that I posted yesterday, 2 words that were stated on the stand in court proceedings a couple days ago. And what was it that officer said? He said that, in fact, yes, our form of ceremony or prayer, that to his ears, he had never heard Native ceremony or prayer. He was not really sure what it consisted of, but to his ears, what it sounded like was basically, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but he said it sounded like violence or a lead up to violence or something threatening. So I don't know. I mean, I think you could say the same though about certain forms. You could say the same about certain forms of music. When the Beatles were popular, there were parents in America who thought that sounded threatening.
But
Isn't that accurate?
That's all that the cops have to say, though, is they feared for their life.
Yeah, we were fearful, and it sounded threatening. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I personally am the kind of person who, although I have had so many experiences in my life that make me feel like I shouldn't trust the law, I also feel like I should always make a paper trail. So I am the kind of person who feels like I wish that every time we had an incident in Standing Rock, we were just creating volumes of paper for them to deal with, going in and filing every single thing, Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I understand the ambivalence for some people to do that. So, and in terms of the idea that we're an organized movement, that we're like jihadists and that we're coordinated, that we have leadership that directs our actions, which probably, I guess, would go back to their constant reference towards, quote, the elders, this mythical, singular group. Yeah, they're running everything. The elders are meeting every day. The elders are telling us what we're supposed to be doing. And I look over at my little 7 and 2-year-old jihadists and just, I don't know. Apparently, here's what the elders said we're supposed to do today, kids. We're going to go out on the bridge. That's not really how it went down. So I think if you put yourself in the frame of mind of where they're at. I actually think they have their own propaganda that is working numbers on the National Guardsmen, the law enforcement officers with Morton County, who were hearing things from leadership that were, in a way, instructing them towards their own sort of jihadist movement. Am I expressing that well? I think they have their own propaganda and their own brainwashing that was taking place on their side of the line.
Right.
So
so, those who really were open enough to really experience what was actually happening were like, wow, there's a difference between what we're being told and what we're experiencing here. And I'm talking about law enforcement. And there were those who walked away. Walked away.
I just heard yet another story about that yesterday, actually. I was on the phone with somebody, and he was talking about the fact that he has a brother who is in law enforcement in Oklahoma. And so they are basically an indigenous family that's working on both sides of the line. They care about the issue of protecting our earth, protecting what we have, protecting our natural resources, protecting our future for children. On the other hand, he does have a brother who's in law enforcement, who incidentally, a number of law enforcement agencies, you'll recall, were sent up to North Dakota. So that included Oklahoma, Ohio, a lot of these other states where at one point he found himself on the front lines, and he was speaking to somebody on the opposite side and asked them to take off their glasses, and they had tears in their eyes because what he was speaking to them was accurate. This is a civil war now.
Right. And that's always the goal for the psychopaths in charge in terms of what happens to any resistance. That's always the goal, is civil war. And civil war often spins out of the resistance because there's always going to be a difference in the tactics that people want to use. And so, when, like John Trudell says, when every act is an act of self-defense, how do you see the bigger picture? When every act is an act of self-defense, strategic planning from that perspective.
Well, this is why this is why I very much support the idea that Cody Hall is speaking about with a class action lawsuit, because think about the concept that, of course, we wouldn't win a lawsuit like that quickly. We would be strung through the mud for years, maybe even decades. On the other hand, it would keep the conversation going and keep it out there for the average person who, today is going out to dinner at a sushi restaurant and not really caring too much about fossil fuel usage. I know this because I used to be that person. Had I not had children 8 years ago, I very much would still be a person, most likely, who was living on the East Coast, enjoying my little, picturesque world that I had created. And I wouldn't really probably be looking at my fossil fuel expenditure. I wouldn't be looking at, what we're doing to our national parks and our forests and our indigenous relationships. Like, my relationships with my Native friends are so important to me that, I do feel like I'm on stolen land. I really do, 100%. I didn't necessarily have that frame of mind 12 years ago. That's the truth. I mean, we all kind of have to come to this from some organic sense. So the idea of a lawsuit related to these documents that are now available is, I think, a fantastic plan, because we have a huge volume of proof now that shows that there was a, extortionist, mob style working going on behind the scenes.
Yeah. And the violence was coming from the law enforcement side. And that's absolutely established. 100% established. No question about it. Now we need to move forward from that truth. Because all of this stuff, as far in terms of water protectors being having to go to court and everything, and facing the system as if they are criminals. That doesn't come from the truth of the violence came from one side,
right,
and one side only. That doesn't come from that truth. It comes from, we're in charge, so whatever we say goes, and we can call your prayer circle a riot if we want to. So,
yeah, I'll never forget that day. I will never forget that day when they called it a riot, because we had just been on the actions. My children were in the back seat. I had taken a group of people down to the shower facilities outside of camp. To people who aren't familiar, there were not showers in camp. We didn't have that ability, so we had to kind of go out of our way. So we were going down to the shower facilities at the marina, and I had the radio on just as a fluke. I tuned it in to AM local radio. I don't even know what made me do that. And I sat there with the windows down on this beautiful day and just listened to the radio. And then next thing you know, they broke into the radio, and it was the live press conference from Morton County with, Sheriff Kyle, talking about, I think he used the term riot 11 times in that particular press release that he was reading. Mm-hmm. And then they questioned him further, and he continued to use that terminology. And I looked around at what was at least a dozen of us, including my kids, assembled at the shower facility, because now they'd all grouped around my car, and we were turning it as loud as we could. And we all were stunned. And suddenly, as soon as that press conference was over, we were on our phones pulling up images from the events that day. Does this look like a riot? How about this one? Does that look like a riot? It's not a riot. There was no riot. But yeah. It's this special usage of terminology. So anyway, yes, we are moving forward, though. That's the important part. And I'm glad we get to talk about that today, because we're moving forward. We have lots of work to do. We are not a coordinated effort. We're not sitting around, getting direction from our prophetic elders every single day. We're independent people who are making choices that happen to all coincide with a similar goal. We're water protectors. So,
yeah, we have this crazy radical notion that we shouldn't be poisoned. I know it sounds nuts. It sounds totally insane, but we have this crazy notion that we shouldn't be poisoned for profit.
You mean you don't think you should have to buy like a $30 water filter before you drink water?
No, I don't. I really, really, really don't. Yeah, so, and, we're going to scream this from the rooftops until people really hear it. These pipelines have nothing to do with energy independence. Not a damn thing. Will not contribute to it in any way, shape, or form. The only thing these pipelines contribute to is making us take all the risk of environmental damage, which will happen. It's not about if. It's not about the possibility. It's about the actual reality that it will happen. We take all that risk and we get nothing for it. And yet,
we get nothing. Yeah.
And yet under fascism, which we're currently living under, these corporations are allowed to use eminent domain law, even though they're not for public use. We're not going to be able to publicly use that energy that's going through those pipelines. We don't get to use it. It's going to export.
Who decided that eminent domain law should be used to allow people to cut through your private property? It's your property, theoretically, that maybe even was, passed down through family members possibly. But it's your property. It could be farmland. It could be right next to your home. Who decided that a company that's making money because they have a business idea, a clever billion-dollar business idea, they're going to go through your lawn, they're going to tear up your farmland. Now, they'll put it all back, and don't worry, because if there's a leak, they're assuring you that they will take care of it.
Which they won't.
But who decided? Of course they won't. But who decided, and we have demonstration of that too, but who decided that was okay? And you and I both know the answer to this. Who decided it was okay?
People who make money off deciding that it's okay.
The people who make money. That's right. The lobbyist groups that make money literally off of the natural gas and big petroleum interests. So it's just so unbelievable. Like if you tried to tell that in a I have been thinking about a children's book, to be honest with you. I joke about it all the time, but if you thought about it from the perspective of writing and illustrating a children's book, a kid would sit there and look at you and go, that's wrong. Yeah. That's wrong.
Yep. So we're in a situation where camps are opening up and closing and opening and closing all over the place, and we want to keep people informed in case they want to go and lend their support to these camps and to their projects. I myself just want to kind of update just a second for Camp Promise. Is that are they closing, or is just sort of everybody leaving, or what? The brown people cleansed from it, or what? What's going on?
I like to think of our water protection camps kind of like a holiday gathering where you have some of those uncles that come in that get a little too drunk and act a little crazy, and everybody's quietly hoping they'll just hurry and eat their pie and go, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So that's how I think of some of these. Camp Promise has some internal issues. The fact is that they've had some internal issues all along. I personally am no longer advising people to go to Camp Promise. That is factually where I'm at. If the camp founders are exhibiting behaviors that appear to me to be taking from other cultures, not really encouraging people of color in a camp that is in a town that's 60% Black. Mm-hmm. When I see some of the things and hear some of the things that have happened, no, I'm not very quick to want to encourage people to go to that camp anymore. I don't see them closing though. So realistically, yes, that camp is still open. They are in Kearsley Park. So that's right in the middle of town in Flint. And people are welcome to still go there. There's also a second project though that has now opened up in Flint, which is the Wolf Den in Flint, which is run by Angelo, who you had on your program a while back.
And he formerly was of Camp Promise, and he has said that he changes his stance on it, but he hasn't really filled me in at all about what the change is. So
yeah, I haven't really seen any public statements around that necessarily either, but they are working out of a house and they're working for the community. Now, of course, this is not a pipeline fight. Neither of these projects we just named are pipeline fights. Those are about the fact that Flint, Michigan has a water quality concern that's coming out of the tap, which affects everything from drinking water to can you bathe in it, money that is now sitting there that the water board wants people to pay and is placing on their property tax because people won't pay for poisoned water. So, that's what they're dealing with. It's more of a community development question as it relates to water.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But elsewhere in Michigan, though, we do have a pipeline fight that's taking place currently. And to my knowledge, there is no camp that's formalized around it, but you can go online and you can find there is a Facebook page for it, and it's the fight against Consumers Energy. Rose Schlappy up in Freeport, Michigan, has been trying to protect the creek near her home. It's very close to her, like visible range, and it's called Duck Creek. I've also heard it referenced as Clearwater Creek, or maybe those are two creeks that converge with each other. I'm not clear about that. There's too much going on for me to pull out maps on everything.
Okay.
But Rose could use help. She could use support. They are actively putting in that pipeline now.
And which pipeline is it?
That is for Consumers Energy. I forget what the name of that actual line is.
Okay.
It's
She's
the
up
Consumers
there in Michigan.
Energy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And over in Minnesota, if we have water protectors that are in that area which this is one thing I've been doing a lot this week and last week, water protectors that maybe didn't want to participate with Flint any longer, or maybe wanted to go work in Flint, but also wanted to go to a camp. I've also been advising those people to go up more towards Michigan at some point in their journey. Michigan is fighting the Enbridge Line 5 situation, which is something that the Honor the Earth Foundation has talked about since last year. Camp Red Power is one of those camps that I mentioned last week. It's on the White Earth Reservation. But I've now heard of 2 other camps that are in the process of opening up, also still in Minnesota. So, I mean, there's lots of opportunity. If you're in Minnesota or you're going to be traveling through, maybe somebody should just message me and I can direct you to the right person.
Okay, yeah. And as we know, the Ojibwe have been fighting inbreeding for a long time. There's been several efforts and camps to stop them from basically just doing whatever they want.
I mean, it's all the same story we've heard before about the disruption of land, disruption of sacred sites, but it's also really about the protection of something very rare in America. I don't think that most Americans understand that we do still have wild rice fields. We do. Right. And we should protect those. I mean, I wish one of our videographers would do a really beautiful job of going out and kind of demonstrating that so that the wider American population could see what's at stake. But, maybe that's yet to come. We'll see.
And how important these wild rice areas are for indigenous cuisine, for, keeping an indigenous diet. This is a people depend on it to eat it. They need it.
Well, yeah, and people I know there are people who would hear you saying that and probably think to themselves, there are people who would dismiss that. And I think that should not be dismissed from this really core perspective that our biology is really wrapped up in also what we're eating, how we're digesting that food. I mean, I know you talk about that other day, you've talked about that with your own experience, your own journey. But I know when you had Brian Yazzie, he spoke about the need for an indigenous palate and returning to something that's really more naturally suited to an indigenous body. And, that would include wild rice, certain grains that are maybe not typically available.
Right. So we got to keep what we have left of those wild rice fields. We got to keep them. So it's definitely a fight.
I think so let's take that concept, because now we can jump all over the map in a way, but let's take what you're just now saying about food and let's take that and let's jump down to Louisiana. Can we?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Repeat.
So, yeah. All right. The land of the Huma Nation, and we're talking 300,000 members of their tribe are really seeing a threat to their land, their waterway, the Atchafalaya. Oh my goodness, my Louisiana family, they would kill me. Atchafalaya Basin. In order to create 12 permanent jobs, this is what's going on. The Bayou Bridge is going to span from one side of Louisiana to the opposite side. The function of this pipeline, they say, is to, aside from the fact they say it's going to create fantastic jobs for the area and it's very safe, you know this story. Aside from that, the Bayou Bridge is also the last link to the Dakota Access Pipeline. So that mammoth pipeline we were fighting up there in Standing Rock, the last link to it is really down in Louisiana. And we say that's the last link because that's what's going to help them get all of that volume of Bakken crude out to a tanker ship, which, as we keep reminding people, is then just going to go over to Asia. So, we've been pushing these facts home, and here it is, the very last link. We're going to be fighting against it. The camp that is set up to fight that is called L'eau est la vie, which is water is life in French. L'eau est la vie. It has a Facebook page. They have all the things that you'd need in a camp. I mean, they're set. They're ready to go. This is in the St. James, Louisiana area. And the Bucket Brigade, I believe, is who has been heading that up. I have a friend, Mary Toma, who's a member of the Bucket Brigade, and she's been working on this for...
Tell us more about them, the Bucket Brigade.
So the Bucket Brigade, I don't remember exactly what year they started, but the probably yet another, terrorist group, according to some, I guess you could say, right? But the Bucket Brigade has been working for years to try to protect Louisiana, because of course Louisiana is really, they call it, I forget, what is the word? It's not America's playground. It's on the tip of my tongue. But it's mostly consisting of a grouping of waterways, swampy areas. They have a very shallow water basin. It's an incredibly huge draw, just like the Everglades are for wildlife, birds. Naturally, this fits within their flight path. So the Bucket Brigade has worked for years to try to protect those waterways, as well as the flooding that occurs from natural storms. Their mission, I think, has expanded over the years as a lot of these fossil fuel companies have also expanded out of Texas and into the wetlands near Louisiana. And in some ways, they have wreaked havoc on these areas. Over where they're protecting for the Bayou Bridge, we're talking about 700 bodies of water, independently named 700 bodies of water. Right. So, I mean, that just gives you a real scope for exactly how many waterways I'm referencing when I talk about going from west to east in Louisiana. So it
makes you wonder why Louisiana was picked, maybe because it's so close to Texas, but as a place to as oil refineries, such a wetland area is probably the absolute worst place that you could have a spill. I mean, like, if you think about containment, the worst possible place you could have a spill would be a wetland area. So just to kind of gauge the what was this Deepwater Horizon spill that we had, how totally, utterly, and completely devastating it still is to the people of the Gulf region, and not just like fishing but just general health. This place has been completely assaulted by big oil.
Well,
with the government's help.
Right. When you spoke about the food affected up in Minnesota, that's the segue for me for Louisiana, because the crawfish habitat is in amongst all those waterways in Louisiana. So the term I was looking for was sportsman's paradise, and I think you have really those two things going hand in hand in that particular state. You have the natural fact that there are lots of food sources that are also being brought in by fishermen to be servicing other parts of the country. So we have shrimp, we have crawfish, we have, fish, all sorts of things there. But then you also have that second side of it, which is tourism. So that's why they call it the sportsman's paradise. You have people who are coming down specifically to fish those waterways, specifically to go out on boats and have a beautiful vacation in the bayou. And those are both affected by a pipeline like this. And once again, for 12 jobs, Kira, 12.
Yeah, so those 12 jobs are worth risking the millions of jobs that they affected with their spill.
Apparently it is, yeah.
Those 12 jobs, right, are worth that. Nope, not. And as we can see with the way that the whole spill, that huge Deep Horizon spill worked, how the government just sort of took over it and protected big oil from the quite frankly, the legal raping that they should have encountered afterward and still be encountering, but are totally protected from now because the government protected them from it. Are they paying for like the damages? No, they're not. It's literally pennies on the dollar in terms of just financial damage. But when you factor in the ecological damage and the years of economic damage from that ecological damage as well, it's, incalculable. That's why the government stepped in to protect them, because big oil would be bankrupt now.
Well, it was also a sacrifice zone, They considered the people to be throwaway people, essentially. And I know that's a painful thing for a lot of us to hear, but that is literally how it's been referenced for, a decade now. And in New Orleans specifically, they're still fighting against the contamination from those storms and from all this big industry. They have a need to replace $300 million worth of lead-tainted soil. You know, we look at the far north, we talk about Flint, and we talk about the lead in the water. But then when you look to the far south, down in New Orleans, you once again have a poor community that is walking around, letting their children play in yards, that is soil that is clearly tainted with lead and above any measurable amount that we would consider to be reasonable. Mm-hmm. And that's by EPA standards. EPA standards allow for a certain percentage, whereas you and I as a mom, we wouldn't allow for any, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So. And that's devastating beyond compare as well. And you know, as we've talked about before, the way that you measure lead poisoning, you don't always catch it, and it can affect you for the rest of your life. So and it will affect you.
It will, 100%.
For the rest of your life. Yeah.
So let's see, where else should we talk about? Can I just plug in here a couple events that are happening that are Sure. maybe not camp related? Because we do have a number of things going on this weekend, and I know you have listeners right now who might not know about them. Okay. The first is on Monday, May 29th, in Asheville, North Carolina, which is like one of my favorite destinations in America.
Yeah.
In Asheville on Monday from 3 to 5 p.m., there is an event being held by the Smoky Mountain Eco Defense Coalition. That's at the Vance Monument, and they are protesting the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. That's important for all of our water protectors to hear about, because this is also a protest in honor of a man who lost his life down in Florida. Now, we've all heard of part of that story, which is that we heard at one point that there was a man who was shot connected with the Sable Trail pipeline. Mm-hmm. And the real story behind that is a lot more confusing, because there's an ongoing investigation still. But on every account, I have really seen, heard, and listened to people saying that he was a veteran, father, and a humanitarian. I mean, I have heard no one say that he was a odd, person that would go off on crazy tangents. No, he was the kind of helpful person who would give to others before he gave to himself. And so they are doing this protest against the Atlantic Coast Pipeline in honor of Jim Marker, because the Sable Trail and Atlantic Coast Pipelines are both products of Duke Energy. It's the same company. Okay. So down in Florida, Duke Energy was doing work for Sable Trail. They're also now up in Appalachia affecting the land. So in Asheville, we have that going on Monday. I want to remind people again about they're protecting Oak Flat. There's a camp out and a gathering in Superior, Arizona at the Oak Flat campground area. And that's June 3rd and 4th. And they will be having music, speakers. You can go camp out there. But the main thing is you need to learn why it's important for us to protect Oak Flat. You need to probably see people face to face so that we can start making some plans and getting some things lined out for that. So that's June 3rd and 4th. And then June 17th and 18th in Cheyenne River, they're going to be honoring water protectors. That's all water protectors who protected the Missouri River with the Standing Rock fight. There's camping available from June 15th to 20th. That's in Fort Pierre, South Dakota. And this is for Native and non-Native. This is for water protectors in general. They want to honor you, and it'll be a beautiful time to be able to get together, see some old friends, maybe even make some plans, do some of those subversive plans that are going to be monitored.
Yeah. So is that right on the Cheyenne River Reservation then?
It is, and okay. It's right over there near an existing camp that's in South Dakota. So,
okay.
And then the last thing I wanted to tell people about was this Climate Justice Action Camp, which, I wish my children were older, because this is for ages 14 to 18, but the Climate Justice Action Camp, it's July 9th through the 15th. This is at Camp Latgawa. That's Latgawa in Eagle Point, Oregon. And what they're doing is they're training kids, teens and preteens. They're training them on how to use art for activism, how to understand what your legal rights are, how do you organize a nonviolent direct action, how do you get your voice heard. They're going through all of those things, plus these kids get to network with other kids who maybe have an experience that's similar to theirs and their level of interest. And there are scholarships available for this camp through the Civil Liberties Defense Center. From my understanding, there are actually full scholarships available still, so everybody should look into that. So that's my last.
And where did they go? Where did they go to look into that?
If they want the scholarships, they can either go to the Climate Justice Action Camp page on Facebook. It's listed as an event page. Or they can go over to the Civil Liberties Defense Center and ask them directly about a scholarship for that action camp for kids.
Okay. Cool. For kids. Yay.
Yeah.
Sounds like fun. So what other camps did we miss? We missed, there's
Let's
camps.
do Ohio.
Ohio. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Ohio is, because we didn't talk about Ohio last week, Ohio has a number of projects going through it. If you look at where Ohio is on the map, it's kind of like a breadbasket state. So it's going to cross a lot of links that head over towards existing refineries. And the main two projects that are taking place in Ohio are the Rover Pipeline, which is a $4.3 billion behemoth Energy Transfer Partners project again. It's going to go through Ohio and cross 70% of the rover is going to go under farmland. So a lot of that is going to be eminent domain problems, farmers standing up and saying, look, I don't really want you to go through my farmland, because if you have a leak, I'm not going to be able to farm that land for the next 15 years. Then the second project that's taking place in Ohio that's making it a powerhouse to look at is the Wayne National Forest. They had a situation where almost 2,000 acres of that forest were made available for fracking leases for gas and oil companies. And the company that the company that received that opportunity, horrible opportunity, were opposed so strongly that they've said that there were at least 100,000 people who participated in standing up and coming to meetings to address this issue. We're not talking just 100,000 signatures on a piece of paper. We're talking people who stood up and said, no, we don't want this. And still, the company, Eclipse Resources, was given these leases, and their intention is to go into the Wayne National Forest to come through with heavy equipment and clear cut certain sections, all the things that come with these pipeline and fracking activities. And somehow they are saying this is not going to affect the Wayne National Forest, which you can imagine is upsetting Appalachian, not just residents, but environmental groups in a very strong way. The group Appalachia Resist is standing strongly in opposition to them right now.
Good.
So, defendwayneforest.com. That's where you can find more info on that.
Okay. I didn't even know about the Wayne Forest one.
Get on it, Kira.
I know. I'm trying to keep track. Holy.
There is no vacation. You are here for a purpose.
So what about, do we have anything going on in New England right now in terms of water protection activities? What you got up there?
Funny. Okay, so we really have two hot areas. The first is, again, New Jersey, which is where I spoke about that just briefly last week, about the Sweetwater Split Rock Camp. I think I said that backwards. Split Rock Sweetwater Camp. They are still standing. They are actually, their structures are still standing from last week. They were under threat of having their teepee taken down due to zoning issues. They're still going. And in Pennsylvania, then, of course, we also have 3 camps. So we have Lancaster Stand, which I spoke about, which is not really particularly open at the moment. They're just having events there every so often.
Mm-hmm.
Camp White Pine, which I know Josh will be on later to talk about.
Yep. As well as Elsie, who is the landowner's daughter. So she's going to come on first, and then Josh will join when she's finished. She's kind of, I guess, the one running it, so she can give you an idea, like culturally and basically what they're doing up there. So that'll be great.
That makes me happy here.
Anything further north, like up in
like Massachusetts, Maine area?
Yeah.
I don't have anything happening in Massachusetts or Maine right now. Now, that doesn't mean it's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
It just means, and actually, that's actually a good point to just mention right here. We are hitting a point with all of these camps and with all of these activities where going on social media and saying, hashtag no DAPL, hashtag no trans Pecos, we're not going to be doing that with quite the same frequency that you might have seen. And that does not mean that we are not working diligently or that there are not camps in those areas. It just means, like, for example, where Josh is and where you're going to speak to him from today, later on, that's a perfect example of that. I don't know exactly how long they've been working on that project, but I know it wasn't open to the public. I know it's still not open to the public.
Mm-hmm.
But their work is still earnestly been mounting over this whole time period. The documentation that they're doing is valuable. The physical presence that they're offering is going to make a difference. The fact that they're staying peaceful, that they are still using their social media powers to network about Mariner East 2 means that they're getting out info about the pipeline, but it's not necessarily about big time promotion of a camp. So there may be, camps up in Massachusetts, Vermont, up in that northern area. If so, I hope people contact you or I and tell us about that.
Yes, definitely want to know about that. There's more southern ones too. Oklahoma. Does Oklahoma have camps that are open right now?
We do. So we have 2 Oklahoma camps. Those are both fighting the diamond pipeline, but then also in a loose sense, they're also fighting the larger injustice of fracking, swine farming, and really excessive poultry farming within that Oklahoma region. So those 2 camps are Okalawa, and that's spelled Okalawa, and
just
Wealaka.
like a play on words, I guess, between Choctaw and Lakota, a play out between 2 native languages, right?
I actually don't know how they came up with that name. It's entirely possible that that's
so Oklahoma is the Choctaw word for red people, and then there's the Oglala, Lakotas, and so and then also the state is called Oklahoma, so that's why I just put just put those together. That's how I imagined it happened in my mind.
We'll have
probably
a smash up word. The second camp is Wealaka, so that's Wealaka, and both of those camps do have Facebook pages. Both of them are still actively going. I had heard that Wealaka was closing down or was officially closed, and then I spoke with someone in Oklahoma yesterday who was at that camp. So, don't believe the hype, I guess, is the deal. Don't believe the rumor. You got to really, look into the camps very closely, even if you've been planning for weeks. Give a call and just double check that things are good. As I said, both of those camps are fighting the Diamond Pipeline, and that's a pipeline that's basically taking fracked product from Cushing, Oklahoma. Some consider that the home of fracking right now because they're doing it in such large volume. They're taking it from Cushing all the way through Oklahoma, through Arkansas, and up to Memphis, Tennessee, where there's an existing refinery. The challenges of this particular pipeline include the fact that they have recently passed a very stringent law in Oklahoma that does not support First Amendment protest. It places very strict fines on people who are protesting or disrupting work activities. That's probably a whole discussion unto itself on a different day with someone that knows more than I do about it. Mm-hmm. But this is a piece of legislation, like an Alex-style piece of legislation that was proposed by those lobbyists we mentioned. And almost for word was proposed in multiple states, and it did happen to pass in Oklahoma. So that's affecting their ability to effectively do some of their actions. But it's not stopping anyone. I mean, we're talking about the Trail of Tears here. That's the importance of the sacred sites that this pipe is going to be passing through and disrupting. So,
wow, of course, right? And Arkansas had been mounting a resistance. There's Arkansas Rising. You saw a lot of videos from them a while back, but I haven't seen anything lately from them. But that's the same. And there's another camp in Arkansas, but I haven't seen much on it lately as well.
There was a camp. Yeah, there was a camp in Arkansas, and I've had trouble finding info about that, actually. Mm-hmm. There also were a number of eminent domain fights there, and Arkansas Rising, which has its own Facebook page, they were not just profiling those people and their stories, but they were the ones who were mounting a lot of those successful actions, including the one in Memphis at that refinery I just referenced.
Yeah. So they've been kicking some butt. So great. We got through some of the camps. Didn't really get too deep into some of the behind the scenes stuff, but as always, I would sort of recommend people checking out who the leadership is in any camp. Sometimes there's issues there. We pointed a few of them out last week. And what I'd like to say about my comments last week, especially concerning Frank Archambault, is that these are problems that we're going to face with any population. So you get 10,000 people together in a camp, and this is going to be an issue that you'll face. Any 10,000 people anywhere in the world, and you will be facing this issue, which is sexual predators. And so we have to really be vigilant in our in our protection of our not only girls but boys as well, and each other. Protecting each other from that kind of thing.
100%. And I think it is like these camps are like little microcosm communities, and they may be very tiny, or they do have the potential to sometimes get as big as a Standing Rock. And I think you still have to, at the beginning, prepare for that largeness is, I think, one of the things that we've learned. So I personally, if there's people who want to go to any of these camps that we've talked about, I personally just hope.
Just stick around. We'll stick around. Just mute your mic and stay on, okay?
Yeah.
Bye, Max. Welcome back to the second hour of The Bridge with Kira. And we have kept Alisha. Are you still there?
I'm still here.
And thank you for pointing out that her name is actually Elise and not, what was I calling her, Elsie? All right.
You were calling her, well, that's all right. I mean, it's kind of close.
It's close. I think I'm thinking about my friend Elvie, and so I got Elise, and I got some names mixed up. So we're going to bring her in, but I wanted to give you a chance to finish your thought that you were saying before we left, if you remember what the thought was.
I do, because I wrote it down. I'm that kind of geek. Okay, so I think it's really crucial for anybody going to any of these camps that you keep in mind a couple general guidelines, and I have 4. And I understand that people get very gung-ho. They get very enthusiastic by not just the kinds of progress that they have seen by the Standing Rock movement, but they get excited about the idea that they're going to go on a trip and they're going to participate finally. So I think it's first important that you be self-reliant. That means please come ready to take care of your own needs. You can't really expect that a camp is there to provide you with shelter, something warm when it gets cold in the evenings, there to provide you with maybe your medical needs, for example. You have to be self-reliant. Second thing is to be flexible. And I think that includes in an emotional and spiritual sense as well. Mm-hmm. Some of these camps are very much guided by indigenous principles. That includes a sense of spirituality that you may not be familiar with. And I think it's important for you to humble yourself and sort of, do some of those moments that our parents trained us hopefully to do, which is to sit down and just take things in and be a little more self-reflective, a little more quiet, and a little more coming from a perspective of learning, I guess I would say. So be flexible. Be productive or leave. I feel very strongly about this because if you find yourself looking around and going, what are we here to do? Have we succeeded in anything this week? Then I think that's not the place for you to be. And not every camp, just because it's one I name, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's especially productive. Also, it doesn't mean that just because a big name is attached to it, it's going to be productive. So ask that question and come up with that answer for yourself or go. And there's plenty of places for you to go otherwise. And then the last thought I have on it is just to be nonviolent and peaceful. And that's not really optional. That includes the fact that we, at all of these camps, are not participating in drinking or drug culture. We are not coming in with weapons. When we talk about the need to have no sex offenders in camps, it's because it's an atmosphere for children, for families, for people to let their guard down. So be peaceful, be nonviolent, understand what those nonviolent principles are. And if you don't, then speak with other people around you, because that's a really good conversation to start getting to know someone else, another water protector. So that's what I wanted to say, Kira.
Okay, great. I'm glad that you said that. Those are all really good advice, and definitely for non-natives going into a camp that's indigenous-led. You need to know that you don't know everything, and that's okay. And like you said, be in a more receptive and learning mode instead of I'm going to come in here and save you type of mode.
Yeah, right.
That's the big difference there. And, there was also, there's sometimes this sort of like, well, your allies aren't appreciated and blah, 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 blah. And let's just forget all that stuff. That's like identity politics that we don't have time to engage in. Let's just focus on what the main deal is here and stopping these psychopaths in charge. They want us to get caught up in all that stuff, like that identity politics stuff. Let's just be okay with other people taking the lead right now.
Well, it's about the work. It's about the goal. And, if I boil it down to just a really basic level, it's kind of about winning, to be honest with you. It's about winning, like a chess game. And for me, that means you do need to be able to get along and coexist and learn from all the people that are around you in these settings. Some of the camps I've named, like I said, are indigenous-led. Some of them are not. Some of them are led by predominantly white environmental groups. I'm not placing any judgments on that. I'm just sort of stating it like it is bluntly. And I think it's very important for us to keep ourselves flexible and movable and to be from an attitude of progress. So,
right. Yeah. So with that being said, let's welcome Elise onto the show, and she's going to tell us about White Pine.
Can't wait.
In Pennsylvania, which is probably about 80 miles from my house. So when I get a chance, I'm going to go visit, say hi.
Love it.
Yes. Stand by. I can't hear it ringing on my end.
Hello.
Oh, here we go. Hi, Elise.
Yeah.
Welcome to the bridge. Thanks for joining us. We've been talking. I'm here with Alisha Ali Vincent. Say hi.
How are you? All right.
And we've been talking about the camps all around the country for about the last hour. But we want to showcase your camp and really because they're all so different. And yours is very unique. And so we wanted to let the people my listeners know, who are really interested in these camps, about yours and what you're doing.
Okay. Yeah, so we're here in South Central Pennsylvania on my family's property, and we're also along the route of the Mariner East 2 pipeline project. It's a Sunoco logistics project. Well, it started out as that. Now that's become an Energy Transfer Partners project because the companies have merged. And we've been fighting for about 2 years, a little over 2 years, I would say, since the company first approached my family. And, it didn't start out with an encampment. It started out with, resisting the use of eminent domain, fighting that in court, losing on the county level in court. Our case against eminent domain is still active today. We're about to take it to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, so that's still an ongoing form of resistance. We worked with a lot of folks over the past 2 years across the state. There's sort of a statewide coalition of people fighting the Mariner East 2 pipeline, just individuals and also some nonprofit organizations. And, we did a lot of paper wrenching, trying to make Sunoco or pressure the DEP to make Sunoco at least follow through with existing environmental regulations when it comes to their permitting and all that kind of stuff. And through doing those things, we were able to delay the project for about a year, just through litigation and resisting permitting. And in the midst of that process, Sunoco actually came to preemptively clear cut on my family's property before they had any permits for the project. And so that was the first time that we had to take direct action. That was about a year into the fight. And So what we did was took to the trees. We had 3 tree sits across the 3-acre easement on my family's plot here, and we were able to prevent a few trees from being cut last year. And then Sunoco received their permits for the project in February of 2017. And so about the same time that those permits were issued, we established a permanent camp here called Camp White Pine, which basically consists of a sort of on-the-ground encampment, with all the logistical stuff like places to sleep, a kitchen, meeting spaces, things like that. There's a lot of ongoing projects with that. And then in addition, we fortified the trees that were prevented from being cut last year and added more platforms and things like that to turn it into a much more elaborate tree sit than the previous year. And right now, those sits are being occupied 24/7. And Sunoco has started construction on the pipeline project in many different places along the route of the pipeline. I'm not really sure why they do it like that, but they seem to be building piecemeal, kind of, every county they can send a crew to. They've got like a small crew. And we've been able to see them doing construction to the west of us for a number of weeks now and slowly sort of working their way towards us. And, we've been expecting a confrontation to happen any day now for a while. And so we're just kind of here holding it down and, keeping on with the other ways of fighting the pipeline. And, but we're not counting on the courts or anything like that. They've, failed us so far. We're not counting on the DEP to revoke any permits anytime soon because they illegally issued the permits in the first place. They did not, the permits that Sunoco, when they applied for, they didn't meet the standards. There were hundreds of deficiencies that they never corrected, yet the Department of Environmental Protection for Pennsylvania issued the permits anyway and allowed them to start construction, and of course, allow them to construct on somebody's property, even if that person is continuing to fight eminent domain. And that's the position that we're finding ourselves in. There's other people along the route in Pennsylvania who are in that same position. There's a farmer in Cumberland County who tried to prevent tree clearing on his property last week. He's still fighting eminent domain. There is a coalition of sort of concerned citizens and parents, mainly from southeastern Pennsylvania, Chester and Delaware counties, in sort of like the more populated part of Pennsylvania. We're out here in the rural areas out here, but places where they want to take these pipelines through areas that have 3,000 people per square mile, and the pipelines are running right next to children's schools. And so there's a number of people who aren't necessarily landowners along the route, but they live right next to it, or their kids go to school right next to it. And so they've banded together and they're fighting in a number of ways. They're doing a lot of community organizing. They're doing litigation. They're trying to compel their towns and townships to, stop the madness, basically, to, not let Sunoco build through areas where, it puts thousands and thousands of people at risk. We've tried to compel a number of different agencies to take responsibility for this project, or to, provide some type of oversight, like U.S. Fish and Wildlife, our local county conservation district. Every time we point something out, we try to call the appropriate agency, but we really haven't gotten any real response. They won't come out here on the ground and take a look at it and, see what we see as the truth, that, Sunoco is destroying wetlands, they're destroying waterways, they're putting people's lives at risk, they're not even following existing laws and regulations, and it just kind of feels like talking to a brick wall when you try to get assistance from, the people who are supposed to oversee these things.
So
that's why it came to direct action, because there's no other way for us to try and prevent the destruction.
Right. Yeah. So you've tried you're continuing to try every legal means possible and running into the same thing. And it's when we take this legal route, we're shown how the system is stacked against those crazy people who don't want to be poisoned and have, our environment poisoned for profit. We see how when we take these steps that are supposed to be available to us in order to stop these type of things from happening, we learn quite quickly how the system doesn't work how it says it even works, much less how it's supposed to.
Right. One example of that was last year when the Department of Environmental Protection was having public hearings about the pipeline, and they were collecting thousands and thousands of comments from people across the state. I think there was something like 30,000 comments collected from in-person testimonials, emails, phone calls. And we went to a few of those, actually, and at one, my mom was arrested for giving a public comment, so it was just like, we just found out pretty quickly that, they weren't on our side, that they were going to, go to those lengths to really just get people out of the way and shut people up. And, all we were doing was telling them the truth, going to them and telling them that Sunoco miscategorized our wetlands. They're not acknowledging the biodiversity or like the ecological importance of things, that they're not mapping people's drinking water wells that are in the path of the pipeline or very close to it. It's pretty simple, straightforward things that have to do with, environmental health and human health. And it's like the agencies don't even want to hear that.
Right. Yeah. So they're not really in place they're in place to make it appear as though we have a legal means to deal with these issues when we actually don't. Yeah.
Right, I would totally agree with that.
So welcome to the res.
Okay.
Welcome to the res, because this is the way it's been for natives since day one with the government. So now that these big oil companies have the government completely and totally 100% in their pocket, no question about it, they can proceed to go into more highly populated areas, like you're talking about in eastern Pennsylvania and things. And where I live in Virginia, these more highly populated areas are now on the table. And here is the living proof of it. It's happening. Things that would never even be considered as areas, like you said, drinking wells, schools, all these in the past wouldn't even be considered as project areas, are now on the table. And so it's going to take everybody who doesn't want to be poisoned to be part of the resistance, because we don't have the law. We don't even have the legal system. We have it on paper, but we don't have the legal system on our side. They're going to somehow make some sort of, I was wondering about some of their decisions. Like you said, you lost at the county level with the eminent domain issue. What is it that they actually, the language that they use to say, yes, this is an eminent domain and things like that? What are the kind of weird, laughable excuses that they've been using so far?
Well, I think with most of these ETP projects and other pipeline projects, the main piece of misinformation that's spread is that they're for the public good, that they're providing some kind of service to the people who are making the sacrifice, to allow it to come through their community. And that's just not true.
Right.
Dakota Access Pipeline is not serving the local populations that were harmed or are being harmed by that pipeline.
Right.
The propane and ethane and butane, the natural gas liquids that they want to pump through this Mariner East pipeline are destined straight for Europe. There's already existing 15-year contracts with a European petrochemical company, for that product. And yet they put out these ads, like they just put one on their Twitter for Memorial Day weekend saying, oh, that propane you're using for your grill, our Mariner East pipeline can provide that capacity for all of Pennsylvania. And it's like, okay, you're admitting that your pipeline could provide,
but it's not gonna.
Pennsylvania, but it's not doing that. You're not doing that. You're already exporting. They have an existing pipeline called Mariner 1, which is an 8-inch pipeline. And they've been exporting through that one since last year already. They've also had 3 leaks on that pipeline since it went into operation last year. And now they want to build 2 much larger pipelines that are part of that same project and just, export at an exponential level. And so it's not even just the exporting either. It's where specifically that's being exported to, which is the plastics industry to, make these products that we don't really need that then wind up polluting places like the Philippines, for instance, with all this plastics pollution in the ocean. And it's wrecking the climate. It's not doing any of these communities along the entire way any good. We have people in the frack fields who are being poisoned, and the DEP won't even provide them with replacement water. And we have everyone that's harmed along the route of the pipelines, compressor stations and pump stations polluting the air. And then, the plastics industry and all the damage that does. So, that's really their main argument in court, is that they're a public utility and they're providing a public service. They're serving the public good, but it's just not true. And we can prove that it's not true. And we did prove that it's not true in court, but unfortunately the courts are in their pocket.
Right. Right. So the courts are in their pockets. It's completely stacked against us here. Those crazy wild people who don't want to be poisoned. Alicia, did you have a question for Elise?
I just was kind of curious about the camp itself, because I was under the impression that you were not an open camp for people to come to, and I wondered if you could just speak about that so that people understand what that means and why.
Yeah, we're not a totally public camp. We are asking for support in the form of donations and spreading media. You know, anyone who does grassroots media or anything like that, we would love to speak with, you know, like people like Kira on this radio show. But as far as on the ground, it's, I mean, things are pretty hot right now. It's not like this is just a camp. It's an ongoing, you know, action every single day. And that is not something that you can just bring anybody into. I know that a lot of people might be ready for that, but also we don't necessarily have the capacity to, you know, provide everything that would be needed for people to come here. So, you know, we're just doing what we can, and, you know, having our little camp here in South Central Pennsylvania, and there's other camps springing up, you know, and I think that it's something that, you know, each individual camp doesn't necessarily have to be that huge, but I think it's more about the number of camps along, you know, all these different pipeline routes. And, you know, people don't necessarily have to take part in an encampment like ours to take action against the pipeline. I mean, this thing is 350 miles long, starts in Scioto, Ohio, and ends in Marcus Hook, which is a suburb of Philadelphia. And so, I mean, we would call on people to take action elsewhere. You know, there's lots of sites that need protecting, and, you know, we can only protect so much, but we're just kind of trying to, like, dig in where we're at and trying to inspire other people to do the same, whether that's along this pipeline route or other pipeline routes. And, you know, inspire other property owners too to not bullied so quickly into accepting these easement offers. You know, they come to your door, they come in an intimidating kind of way, they threaten people with eminent domain basically off the bat. But we've been battling eminent domain for 2 years, and it's still undecided. It is not even a done deal. There was just a positive ruling in the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas yesterday that is allowing another suit against eminent domain to continue to move forward, even though that's at a lower level court, and the Commonwealth Appeals Court has, you know, found in favor of the company in a few cases. There's still judges that are allowing lower level cases to proceed, you know, so there's still hope to even win it that way. You know, if there was 100 landowners along the route of this pipeline who were saying no as firmly as we are, or our farmer friend over in Cumberland County that I was mentioning earlier, then they would have a serious problem. I mean, just this one little camp is causing them a serious problem. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to handle it. And, yeah, I mean, it's going to play out how it plays out, but, you know, we're not going anywhere. So they're just going to have to deal with it.
Yeah,
I mean, I love following. Oh, gosh.
I was just going to say, every day that you know, avoid the project is a victory. It's a small victory. And so if you have to just delay until as long as you can, then that's what you have to do as well. Just like if you have to do direct action, that's what you have to do. But go ahead, Alicia.
Well, I'm just really enjoying watching the progress on this because, I mean, I know several people who are there with you, and they kind of send me little messages here and there and let me know what the update is. And to me, it looks like you really are taking this slowly, step by step, according to what works best for you and also for your family, just your personal sense of ethics. And I I like watching this because it's very different from, any Standing Rock camps or anything related to that people might be familiar with. But it's not all that different from what people are doing around the world to prevent fracking or to prevent some of these energy companies. I mean, in Poland, there was an entire community that stopped Sunoco from, this is several years back, but they stopped them by simply setting up an encampment with I think it was between 70 and 90 people. And they were there for almost an entire year, pressured by everyone from their local priests to people in surrounding towns. And we're talking just average townspeople who wanted to stop what was taking place. And they didn't become world renowned necessarily until they became successful. And that includes also a lot of farmers, a lot of people with agricultural land or properties that have been in their family for generations. And so to me, there's a lot of parallels to that, what has been happening in Europe over the years to what you are doing where you're at. Because again, you're in a really highly densely populated area. I mean, I used to live in Baltimore, so I kind of get the concept that, you're in a rural area, but you're not that far away from some very large cities. So you could at any moment have lots of people come out and do direct actions from those cities, but yet you're doing this in a more discreet fashion.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely not like Standing Rock. This is not an Indigenous-led camp or campaign, but we do try to take direction from that too. I spend a lot of time, still these days trying to listen to the people from out there who came out as leaders, and I've just just following that leadership, I think, is really important. If people are going to come out with their own encampments, on private property that is on stolen land and everything, I think it's essential to recognize that and be upfront about that. But, to use that position to fight these companies who are hurting people who are still on their Indigenous territory, because if we can, land a blow on ETP from here, then that still helps the fight against, the DAPL pipeline and the continuation of it into the Bayou Bridge pipeline in Louisiana. So, I think it's just, it's essential to reach out and work with all kinds of people as well. We're working with people living in suburban areas, farmers. There's a lot of conservative folks in the area where I live, and a lot of them, agree with what we're doing. And it might just be on a very basic level of like a property rights issue, but having those conversations opens up the door to the other issues, like Indigenous sovereignty, environmental racism, things like that. So I think that it's been really important for us in this fight, at least, to just have a big diversity of people that we're working with.
Yeah.
Are you talking with the
Pennsylvania? I'm sorry. The rural areas really share so much. And I in Standing Rock, it was really a shame that more rural people didn't get involved in the fight, because we're screwed in rural areas in many, many similar ways to the way that folks are screwed on the reservation. So because there's fewer people around, it's they do a lot of sneaky things to rural residents on a regular basis, just by the mechanisms they have in place to do that on the state level, on the federal level, on the local level. Getting together and comparing notes is a worthy endeavor for sure.
Here in Pennsylvania, this pipeline fight that's happening now is really just a continuation of the fight against fracking, which has, affected mainly rural areas throughout Pennsylvania, like the west, the northwest, the northeast, for the most part. We have 12,000 or more fracking wells in the state. And, a lot of people have been harmed by that. There were over 9,400 complaints related to fracking made to the DEP that just got shoved away in a closet and never dealt with. And then the DEP decided that they were going to work with these quote-unquote energy companies to do this massive pipeline build-out for the next 10 years. So they've had the 10 years of fracking, now they want 10 years of pipelines, and so I've learned a lot from people who have been involved with that fight for a decade or more, fighting for their lives against the frack wells. So there's already been a lot of organizing in rural Pennsylvania when it comes to that. Not in the area where I live specifically, because we were actually spared from that fracking boom due to the geology here. But I have a lot of comrades that have been at it for a long time and have taught me a lot. And, I wouldn't be able to be doing what I'm doing without, that groundwork already being laid.
Before we get Josh in here, I just wanted to make sure if there was anything else that you wanted to get out to the listeners today.
Not really. I think that pretty much sums it up. Just, okay. fight all the pipelines and, stand your ground. And if you have questions about how to do that, there's so many resources out there. There's so many people who are involved with these fights already, and it's pretty easy to, connect with people on social media, different websites. There's one website that I want to point out, which is stopetp.org, which is a new coalition of folks who are fighting a number of different energy transfer partners projects. So that's going to be something that's going to continue to grow. And, if we don't stop this pipeline, we're going to win eventually, because we're really starting to come together now. So we're just going to have to keep building.
Yep. And keep screaming the truth till it's heard. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Sorry I cut you off there, Alicia, but we got to get Josh in here for the last 20 minutes or so. Thank you again. And
all right.
I'll come visit and say hi soon.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Steve, we're going to bring Josh in here. Stand by.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome to the bridge, Chef Extraordinaire Josh.
I was confused. I was still listening on the other side, and I was in parallel universes there temporarily.
No, weird, huh? Listening to the show you're about to go on to is a weird.
Well, I thought I'd try to figure out what Elise might left for me to say, which is nothing.
She covered it. She was covering it. Good for you. So I guess you'll have to talk about food.
Oh, shit. Well, good thing I can do that.
You can do that. Yes, you can. Yeah. So the past people who have listened in the past know that you're somebody who's putting your chef skills to work in supporting these direct action camps. You've been all over the place, and right now you're at White Pine.
I am, yes. Talk about direct action. It's 24/7 here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're delivering food to people who are tree sitting?
Yeah, I had to keep them. There's not a second of the day that doesn't go by without them occupying the trees that are still left in the easement after they attempted to clear cut it this time last year, or a little bit before this time last year.
So they got a few trees, but not all of them, and there's probably no consequence for that either, and they didn't have the lease or the permit.
Yeah, no. Yeah, no. I'm sure that Elise explained it. They hadn't even gotten any sort of okay to go ahead with any sort of construction. That's what was weird about it. They didn't have to have a permit to cut the trees down, but they had to have a permit to come back and move them.
Oh, weird.
just they haven't even done that yet on the property that we're on. I guess to make that a little bit more clear, there's a highway that separates the active construction that you see that I post and is just literally across the road, and that's what you're hearing the cars going by, because I thought I'd come down here and just watch to see what they're doing tonight, because I hadn't looked yet. But it's literally across this wetland and a highway. So there's less than a quarter of a mile from where their floodlights are and us. It's an interesting transition because they're preparing an HDD pad over there that's going to go under the wetlands, under this highway, and pop back up quite literally where there's somebody in a tree.
Yeah. And so so far when they've come, have they come while people are tree sitting yet, or is that like something that could happen any day now?
Well, did Elise elaborate any on what happened last year? I mean, people got arrested and whatnot last year, but what happened, they got too far in the season and they couldn't do anything. Nobody has actually tried to come and evict us yet this spring. So it makes kind of the guessing game of trying to watch the daily construction farther along, counting steps in the assembly process, and trying to gauge at what point, and then try to actually guess their strategies. I mean, as we all found out today, I guess, they use military tactics and covert this and that, so play their own game.
Yeah. Yeah, and they use whatever means necessary. If the law kind of works out, then they can use the law. If the law doesn't work out for them, then they, let's just forget about this law for right now.
Or buy it.
Right. Just pay off whoever. And so here we are up against the brick wall again. So we got our own brick wall.
I think the brick wall is a little shorter in Pennsylvania. I think we got a little bit of a legit shot.
Excellent.
Elise was talking a little bit about, this is a 300 and something mile long pipeline, there's that I know of and that I have been to personally and seen with my own eyes. There's at least 4 other active construction sites in Pennsylvania with mega machinery, like not just little operations going on. They've got hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars worth of machinery at 4 different spots. And so it's not like what we're doing here is unique, yes, because it works out perfectly for where we're exactly at and where they're wanting to put their drill pads, and as far as being as much in the wind as possible. But there's certainly other places along the route that are way accessible. Just in the last couple of days, I was driving around and found places, road crossings and whatnot. You could just reach up and touch the pipeline if you wanted.
Yeah. So we're not in a situation where there's barbed wire protecting anything.
No. Just in the last week, they've actually brought security to across the way from us. But there's no fencing. It's one guy sitting in a car.
Yep. See, like I'd already have a strategy worked out for that guy. Hi, big boy.
Yeah.
How distracted.
At this point, that guy's probably more worried about us than we're worried about him.
Probably. Yeah.
He probably is looking over his shoulder.
A little bit, yeah.
What would he do if he delivered him lunch?
Hey. The mind could go wild with possibilities here.
And it does.
Right. And as Elise pointed out, there's many, many resources out there if somebody is curious or wanting new information or more information. Yes. There's definitely more than one way to throw a monkey wrench around.
Mm-hmm. And delay a project and bankrupt a project and divest from a project.
And in doing so, getting more people involved in other projects. And we're gonna, with such the focus on ETP right now, At that website that she mentioned, I didn't even know about that. So that's how new it is, I guess. That it's not just one pipeline at a time now. It's all the same people
with the same tactics. And so now that it's out there, like we talked about at the beginning of the show, the Intercept article that came out, the using anti-insurgency techniques against the people and following people
right.
and targeting people and trying to make nonviolent people look like they're the violent ones when they're the ones under attack. All that.
Sure, yeah.
So,
well, they have training seminars for that now. I mean, Morton County's going around the country giving trainings to different police departments on how to deal with those pesky protesters.
Yeah, wow. They just don't want to be poisoned. How crazy is that? Those nutty people. They're crazy. So there's going to be no consequence. I mean, this is mind-numbing stuff that's coming out. And unless, like Alicia was saying at the beginning, we form some sort of class action suit and go after them in court, there will be no consequence. And even a class action suit is going to pay off a bunch of lawyers, So
right. I don't know. Play their own game, I guess. Get smart.
Yeah, bankrupt them. Just make it really hard for them to put a pipeline in wherever they choose. I think that's
wherever they choose.
Yeah, wherever they choose to do it, just have to make it hard. Keep using alternative media to spread the truth. Like we've been talking about in the show, the biggest truth being that it's not about energy independence at all. It's about a handful of psychopaths making profit off of killing all life and stealing your property. I mean,
yep, that's a pretty simple way of putting it, but it's pretty accurate.
Yeah,
having no regard for anything, but their bottom line.
Mm-hmm. Just hammer it. Just keep hammering it. And I really like how Elise has pointed out that we just have to fight it along the whole way as landowners. Those are the people that the psychopaths in charge do not want to get involved, is these landowners, because there is power there, but it's only in numbers.
Yep, you're right. More on board, and like Elise pointed out, it's not just the far left thinkers or the whatever progressives. I mean, there's people with Trump signs in their front yards that are scratching their heads, going, "Well, that just doesn't seem right."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't, does it? So we have, we have about 10 minutes. Alicia, was there anything else you wanted to find out about anything?
I wanted to know, Josh, if there are man camps that you're familiar with this particular project.
Oh, sure. In Altoona, there's several of the motels I've heard that are quite full. There's some sort of camp at the fairgrounds. I haven't actually seen that one. But they're here and there. Altoona's kind of a drive from where we're at here, but there's also active construction on the other side over there. So Altoona being the biggest city, they probably have more sleazy motels and whatnot. But they're not man camps like Texas man camps. So you don't just set up in the middle of nowhere and take over an area. The fairgrounds would probably be the closest to a Texas man camp, but it's still in the fairgrounds.
Okay.
I think I'm curious about that, though, because I would be interested to look into what's going on in terms of disappearances, violence against women. I would want to know about those kinds of things and if there is, in fact, an increase in that or not. I know up in the Dakotas, up in Canada, down in Texas, I know there's been a measurable increase anytime man camps are involved, even when they're coming out of a hotel scenario. So I wonder if local residents up in Pennsylvania are familiar with the idea that they've welcomed in out-of-state workers with lots of money in their pocket to burn, when they're not working on a pipeline. I don't think people think about that much.
Could I mention something about that? It didn't happen this year, but it happened last year. While this was all getting set up, there was a Sunoco worker who was caught trying to meet a 14-year-old girl.
Wow.
I believe that was in southeastern PA. So, I mean, that's one incident that got a lot of publicity. So we do know that it's happening, but I mean, as with, violence against women is always underreported, and they hide away in these corners, hotel rooms, man camps, and so there's a lot that goes unreported, I'm sure.
Right. Yeah. And that's the only one that's been, that you know about that got any, media attention?
Yeah, that's the only one that I heard about in the press, and that happened last year with things happening on this project in particular.
Mm-hmm. And I imagine that they just sort of book a bunch of those cheap motels along certain rural routes and things, and they just kind of spread them all out there.
Right. They seem kind of dispersed around here. I think that they've got a handful of guys at every hotel in town. I mean, we only have a few hotels in town here, but like Josh was saying, the next bigger city over, they're also over there camping and using hotels. I think that they're trying to sort of be a little bit nondescript by doing that, and not just settling themselves in one massive area. I mean, that's what I'm noticing, basically. And I don't know if that's really just a logistical thing or if it has to do with their PR or what it is, but that's the way that they seem to be doing it around here.
Huh.
And that's the way it's going to be done in more highly populated areas as well, is that you're just going to have a bunch of local hotels and motels booked up. So what is you mentioned Altoona. What is the town that's close to the camp or the city?
It's Huntington, Pennsylvania. It has a population of about 7,000.
Yeah.
And we live about 15 miles from that town.
Okay.
Out in the valley.
So if you were to get, say, go grocery shopping, you'd go to Huntington, for instance?
Yeah, most likely, yeah. And yeah, I mean, but there's not a whole lot there. It's, mainly a residential place. It's, it doesn't have a whole lot of industries going on. I mean, the one main thing for this county is tourism. We have a pretty significant lake here that actually the camp is only about 2 or 3 miles from as the crow flies. And that tourism industry for this, small county is being harmed by this pipeline. They were constructing until about mid-May. People started to come there in April to recreate, and then they're going to be back there again in the fall. They're going to be there next year. I mean, one really strange thing about this pipeline is that it's a twin pipeline, but they're only putting in one of the pipelines right now, a 20-inch line, and then they want to come back next year and put in another 16-inch pipe. So they want to go back along the entire route and dig it all back up again, cause, more erosion, more compaction, more headaches, spend more time in these communities to build a second pipeline because they didn't want to wait to build this first one until they had all their ducks in a row for the second one. So they figured they would just cause communities twice as much grief.
Wow, the entitlement to there.
Yeah.
How can they be making money? Well, because they're basically subsidized. It's basically a subsidized industry because if you look at the impact of all of that, they're not paying for it at all. So they can make the money off of building pipelines when it's highly destructive. It's just really, it boggles the mind that someone, that a group of psychopaths could think this stuff up and perpetrate it with little consequence so far. Amazing.
Right. Not only do they not have to really pay for the environmental or human damage, but they're literally also being subsidized by the Pennsylvania government. Like, there are millions and millions of dollars worth of grants being funneled from an alternative energy fund that was made for Pennsylvania. And they're taking millions out of that and putting it into pipeline grants because they want to connect more institutions like schools and hospitals and places like that into a natural gas grid, because they're not currently on that grid. They could be using those funds to create alternative energy projects for those institutions, but that's not what they're doing. They're instead, giving to these pipeline companies so they can, put more people at risk, basically.
Yeah, they could be using that for solar energy, for instance. Yep. I mean, solar panels are like a solar roof now is cheaper than like a regular roof. So solar.
Right. I mean, that's what the funds were earmarked for, and then they changed their mind when they decided to, do this pipeline boom with the companies. They're just, they work hand in hand. There's really, no line there between the companies and the government anymore.
That is fascism right there. That's the very definition of it. We've got 2 minutes before we're going to go. Did anybody want to get in some last words? Thank you again for continuing to add to the conversation. Really appreciate your story and what you're telling us about what's going on in Pennsylvania. Josh, did you have anything else you wanted to offer in this last couple minutes here?
Not really. You guys covered it again.
Alisha? Miss Alisha? Where did she go?
Sorry.
Okay. Oh. Did you have any last words? Were you muted?
I was muted so my dog could bark. Real life. So I just want to say thanks for having me on again, and thanks for all the people you've had on today and last week. These are actually some of my favorite people out there, because everyone that you've had on in the last 2 weeks is actually out there doing work that's making a difference. So thanks.
You bet. Thanks everyone for listening, and come on back next week. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.